Hello there, my friends. Mr. X Dreams here. I hope you're doing well. What you're about to hear is my written interpretation of the allegedly true story of Ivan the Creeper, sent to me directly via email. The story was very compelling, and I had to do some digging to verify its authenticity, but I did discover it is actually from an original source, and it is a true story, as far as I can confirm. There is kind of a story behind how I got this story, and I will tell you that after the story is told. A story after the story, if you will. I have some wonderful guests today, two of the best narrators I know. A longtime friend and all-around wonderful guy, Scott, aka Nature's Temper, and one of my Triple OG collab partners, Nix from Penny Dreadful Moment. I haven't worked with these great people in quite a while, so I'm very happy to have them over for a visit. Make sure you like and subscribe this video, share it with your friends and all that if you enjoy it. But don't forget to check out my friends' channels as well after you're done with this video. There'll be links to their channels in the description box down below. We'll talk again after the story. Dear Mr. X, my name is Brianne. I wanted to tell you about a series of disturbing real-life events that happened to me several years ago. This all started on the day of my 28th birthday. I was working at a small, double-sided drive-through coffee stand about 30 minutes outside of Seattle. I'd been working there for about a year and was scheduled to work the closing shift during the week. I had the opening shift on weekends. I'd been working as a barista for about 7 years at that point, and had never been confronted with a situation that made me feel unsafe while working alone. I heard stories of other baristas in the area who had violent or dangerous interactions with some of their customers, so I knew how fortunate I was. Unfortunately, though, that was about to change. Thursday, November 7th, around 6:45 p.m. I was about to close the stand at 7 p.m. as usual. I rarely saw any customers come through past 6:30, and because of that, I felt myself jump slightly when I looked up from the espresso machine I was cleaning to see a man standing behind the glass of the closed window beside me. Adding to my alarm was the fact that he made no noise whatsoever as he approached. He also made no attempt to grab my attention once he got there. Instead, he just stood behind the window in complete silence with this awkward, unnatural smile on his face. At first, I wasn't sure if he was a customer at all. I knew there was a large group of homeless in the area. They were known to occasionally come up to the stand and ask for free coffee or water. For safety reasons, I typically don't serve walk-up customers after dark. But because I made eye contact with him, I had to at least acknowledge the fact that he was there. So reluctantly, I decided to serve him. He said his name was Ivan. He was around my age and seemed reasonably well kept. His clothing and overall appearance were pretty clean. He spoke decent English, albeit with a slight Eastern European accent. His eyes, though, were utterly unnerving. His stare unsettled my stomach, literally. My intuition was telling me that something about this individual was very, very wrong. Every red flag possible was beginning to raise up in my mind, and I couldn't shake the deep, oppressive sense of darkness that I felt coming from him. I would soon find out exactly why I was feeling this so strongly. I reluctantly began preparing the espresso machine to make him a drink. He looked on, clearly unsure what he wanted to order. I asked him twice what I could get started for him before I realized he probably wasn't there to place an order at all. He just kept waffling. Before long, he directed our interaction toward normal small talk. He asked where I was from, how long I had been working at the stand. I gave only 2 or 3 word answers, hoping my tone would convey my disinterest in any further conversation. I was still trying to close up the stand after all. After a painfully long pause, he asked slowly,
"So, do you have a boyfriend?"
Annoyed, I replied before I could even think twice.
No.
At that point, I was completely ready to wrap up the whole thing and just get home. I told him I needed to finish closing up. Upon hearing that, he walked away from the window. The last words I heard from him were that he was looking forward to seeing me again very soon. Moments later, he was out of sight. Something in my gut told me that he was not very far away, though. I could feel his dark energy nearby, and I knew, somehow, he was watching me from somewhere beyond my sight. I locked up the stand, walked quickly to my car, and left, looking over my shoulder the whole time. By the following day, I'd pretty much forgotten the encounter I'd had with Ivan, and went into work as usual. Friday, November 8th, around 7 p.m. I was just about to end my shift and lock up the stand as usual. I was closing out the register when a movement caught my eye from outside the window on the opposite side of the stand. I turned my head toward the area to see Ivan, looming there in a state of watchful silence. My stomach sank so quickly it gave me cramps. My hand instinctively rose up to touch my belly, giving myself some shallow comfort. The stand suddenly felt ice cold, amplified by a feeling of dreadful emptiness. Ivan smiled at me with a haunting grin, waved, and then pulled open the window in front of him. Although he didn't seem aggressive at the time, there was something incredibly threatening about his choosing to open the window himself, rather than wait for me to open it. It left me feeling somewhat helpless and unsafe in the moment. That was not a feeling I was familiar with at all. It took me a moment to gather my thoughts, and once I did, I cleared my throat and told him I was off the clock and closed for the day. He gave me a wide smile as he replied,
It's okay. I didn't come for the coffee. I came for you.
Upon hearing this, I noticed a shift in the energy between us. The fear I had previously been overcome with had now made a sudden and jolting transition into an extreme level of irritation.
I don't care what you came for.
I told him as sternly as I could manage.
It's going to have to wait until tomorrow, because I am fucking closed.
At this, he chuckled a bit before finally raising both of his hands as an indication of surrender, saying,
All right. Fair enough.
His smile disappeared. His eyes became even more focused on me. His gaze intensified.
Then I will see you tomorrow.
The way he said those words, they felt less like a statement and more like a threat. I was frozen for a moment, staring at him as he slinked away into the evening. The second he was out of view, I rushed over to the window and slammed it shut, locking it. Just like before, despite not being able to see him, I knew that he was nearby somewhere. I could feel his eyes fixated on me still, burning holes through the walls. I left the stand as quickly as I could and got into my car to drive home. Unlike with the last encounter, though, Ivan remained a heavy, smothering presence in my mind for the rest of the night. I didn't sleep at all. Saturday, November 9th. Per my usual schedule, I got up crazy early to work the opening shift at 5 a.m. I got to the stand at 10 minutes to 5, and for the first few hours everything was pretty much normal. By about 8:30 a.m., the sun was finally breaking through the clouds, chasing away the morning chill. I leaned on the stand's windowsill, appreciating the weather, when I noticed a familiar vehicle approaching. The truck belonged to my ex-boyfriend, Barry. We'd broken up about 6 months prior after I discovered his cheating. He pulled up cautiously near the window I was standing at, and I asked him what he was doing there.
I know you probably don't want to see me, especially not today. I know. I just wanted to wish you a happy birthday and see how you're doing.
Honestly, that took me off guard. I was about to thank him and then promptly give him an earful about how uninterested I was in talking to a cheater on my birthday. After all, I was still pretty hurt. Before I could get the words together, I noticed a figure in the distance behind him, about 100 yards away. It was him, Ivan. Instead of telling Barry off, I whispered to him that I needed him to stay with me.
Please, even if another customer pulls in for service behind you, just please stay until that guy is gone.
I could see he recognized the fear in my eyes, and he agreed immediately to stay. Ivan disappeared around the corner and made his way to the other window. I conjured as much focus as I could, and I turned to face him. I walked slowly over to the window and was a bit surprised by what I saw as I drew near. His face was puffy and reddish, like he'd been crying. His eyes were bloodshot. I started to notice tears hanging along the bottom of his jawline. Disregarding his apparent emotional state, I told him he needed to leave.
I'm not going to serve you today.
I don't need this anymore. You can have it.
He cut me off. As he said it, He threw what looked like a passport into the stand through the open window. I picked it up, puzzled, noticing Russian writing on the cover. A combination of anxiety and cringing disinterest swirled in my head. I'm not sure why, but I asked him why he would no longer be needing it.
I just won't.
The words hung in the air between us for a while, as I attempted to make sense of what such a gesture might mean, if anything at all. Then, something suddenly clicked in my head, sending a strong pang of dread down through my chest and into my gut. It culminated in an audible gasp escaping my lips. Ivan's downcast eyes looked up at me as if to acknowledge that I finally understood what was going through his mind. No one visiting a foreign country would abandon their passport unless they intended to never see their homeland again. I got the distinct feeling he was making his final arrangements. In an effort to sever the unspoken conversation taking place between our locked eyes, I glanced over my shoulder at Barry, who now had a
"What the fuck is going on?"
look on his face. I know he recognized the desperate, pleading fear in my eyes. A look of panic washed over his face as he attempted to understand what had just taken place between the stranger and myself. I turned back to Ivan and noticed his crying had stopped. The pain in his eyes was now replaced with a look of what I can only describe as complete, unhinged insanity. It was crystal clear to me. This man had passed the point of no return.
"God came to me last night in my dreams,"
he began slowly.
"He told me you will be my wife. You are my wife. You are mine. You are for me."
A sickening, sadistic smile curled the corners of his mouth up in such a way that it was almost physically painful to witness. I felt my heart slamming violently into the bones of my chest as adrenaline began to surge through my system.
"You are my wife,"
he stated again.
"You are my wife, and now you come with me, right now."
He planted his hands on the ledge of the window between us and began hefting himself up to climb inside. I practically threw myself across the small distance between he and I, and quickly slammed the window shut, locking it. He pushed his weight back down off the ledge and paused for a moment. The dead-eyed expression on his face made my blood run cold. I felt my insides shudder in a way that I'd never felt before, an anxious vibration that was working its way throughout my entire body. I knew my problems were just beginning. Almost as if he could hear my thoughts, Ivan winked at me as he began to march around toward the back of the stand. Moments later, I heard a faint but familiar beeping sound coming through the door. He was trying to guess the code to the electronic keypad that secured the back door, which also happened to be the only door in and out of the small stand. I told myself there was no way he could ever manage to guess the 4-digit code. I actually tried to convince myself to rule out luck as a possibility.
Not gonna be that easy. Not gonna be that easy,
I said under my breath, unsure whether I truly believed it. The sudden realization that I had spoken too soon hit me like a dead weight thrown directly at my gut. The dread that followed what I heard next is something I'll never forget. I almost fell back a few steps. I went head first into fight-or-flight mode, and my vision tunneled as I heard the sound of the keypad, indicating access granted, followed by the heavy thunk of the steel deadbolt. I watched in horror as the back door began to slowly swing open, knowing that something evil was about to walk through it. Everything around me seemed to disappear and fade into darkness. It felt as if time had stopped entirely in that moment. As the light from outside poured in, I began to hear a blood-curdling scream resonating off the walls in the small stand. My body became even further paralyzed as the glint of the largest knife I'd ever seen poked into the frame. Ivan's clutching hand followed. It was only then I realized the scream was coming from me. He came inside, and suddenly the fear and panic had choked out even the most desperate of cries. Suddenly, I heard a muffled voice coming from outside the closed window beside me. I looked over and saw Barry with shock written all over his face. He was frantic, yelling something I couldn't make out. My wits returned to me and I ran to the window.
Barry, he's got a fucking knife!
I saw Barry's eyes widen before he suddenly disappeared. He basically flew from where he'd been standing, all the way to the back of the building. Then, in the corner of my eye, I caught sight of the dark, looming presence that was with me inside the stand. Ivan, now standing no further than 10 feet away from me, emanated an evil that overtook every inch of the cramped space. It made the air so heavy around me it became hard to breathe. It was thick and toxic in my lungs. As my struggle to breathe got worse, Ivan continued to move closer to me, taking slow, taunting steps. He gripped the knife firmly in his hand, holding it at his side. His eyes themselves cut into me, deeply, over and over again as he spoke softly.
You are my wife.
Although it seemed like forever, I believe Ivan only actually managed to take a total of 3 or 4 steps toward me before I saw Barry's arm appearing from behind, wrapping itself around Ivan's neck and clamping down hard. As I stood there in a renewed state of fear-induced paralysis, I watched as Barry pulled Ivan back by the neck with such force that the creeper's feet flew out from beneath him. Suddenly, both Ivan and Barry were on the ground just outside the door, with Barry maintaining an unbreakable grip on Ivan. Barry yelled strict instructions.
You move a fucking muscle and I swear I'll choke the fucking life out of you.
To my complete surprise, Ivan remained totally still, never once making even the slightest gesture of resistance. Barry kicked the knife out of his hand and told me to pick it up, secure it, and call the cops. It felt like hours before the cops arrived, with my system still so amped up, but it was really only a few minutes. When they did show up, the entire area was completely overtaken by law enforcement. There were more officers than I'd ever seen respond to a single call before. I watched at least 6 cops descend on Ivan, pulling him away from Barry's hold and detaining him. They carried him practically hog-tied into a waiting cruiser. One of the responding officers told me that while they were interviewing me, Ivan kept insisting that I was his wife. He claimed God had told him that I was intended for him, to be his forever. According to him, he was simply there that morning to collect that which he had been promised by the King of Heaven himself. Anyway, thank you for listening, Mr. X. I hope you're well. Sincerely, Brienne. Hey there, my friends, it's me again. I said earlier you might have heard something like this story before, and the reason for that is kind of interesting, so I'll explain. A week or so ago, I got an email from a very generic-looking username claiming that this story was theirs. And something about it was just, it struck me as a little bit odd, and I got a hunch. So I basically copy and pasted one of the paragraphs into Google, and I saw that the entire story verbatim had been posted to Reddit about 2 years ago. And given the fact that it was kind of a generic message with only the pasted story itself in the email, I figured maybe somebody stole that story and then sent it to me. So I actually reached out to the person who originally posted it on Reddit and reached out to her, and she eventually ended up confirming both in my email and on Reddit itself that she is the original real person who had the experience and submitted the story. Now, this story, I'll throw a link for the actual original Reddit post into the description box as well, so that you could check it out, because it's beautifully written and it's very impactful. And it was kind of hard for me to do this because it was so well written. I always kind of rewrite things into my own style. So what you heard me read was my interpretation, like my version or rendition of that. And if you want to read the original, I'll put a link in there. And if I didn't put the link, remind me, please, and I'll throw it in there later. So anyway, I did speak with the original poster, and she told me that Ivan basically eventually spent about 9 months in jail. And for some reason, he just, even though it looked like it was some attempted murder with a deadly weapon, even though it seemed to me that it should have been a little bit more of a punishment than that, he was basically sent to a mental facility specifically for criminals that have mental health issues. And apparently after that he was sent off to a facility for criminals that are dealing with mental health issues, which, if that's what his deal really was, then I guess that's the only way to deal with it. The good thing about it is that although he might be released back into society at this point, but he is legally forbidden from coming into contact with Brienne, and that's not her real name, by the way. So if you want to make me very upset and angry about a story, send me a story that includes a coward and a predator. Somebody who finds someone who he believes or she believes to be lesser or weaker than them, and they try to take advantage or dominate another person. That already by itself is infuriating to me. But when you kick it up another level by, for example, Ivan was really tough and really menacing and scary until a physically more powerful, a physically superior person confronted him. And then all of a sudden he became a dead fish and unable to even offer the slightest resistance. I'm not saying that it would have been better if he fought Barry, but it just speaks to the mindset that Ivan had. I don't know what mental health issues Ivan may or may not have. I don't know if he just kind of got off with that because of saying or claiming he had mental health issues, or I don't know. But all things being equal, a person who tries to go and victimize someone, but then when they're confronted, they suddenly are no longer tough, and they're no longer able to take advantage of the players involved in the situation. They just give up. It makes it even more blood-boilingly frustrating to me to hear things like that. It just shows this like deep level of cowardice that elevates the already heinous crime of terrorizing an innocent person who's just trying to go about their life. So anyway, I'm off the soapbox on that. Another gigantic shout out to my friends Nix of Penny Dreadful Moment and Scott of Nature's Temper. Don't forget to show them some love and subscribe to their channels, and let them know that you are an emissary of the Dreamer Squadron. Let them know that I sent you. You will not be disappointed if you go there and check out their work. It's fantastic, and their voices are amazing. And you'll notice Scott actually played 2 different voices in 2 different accents. And I tapped him for this role because he is one of the best voice impression artists among our YouTube narration community. So he was gracious enough to lend his time for that. And Nix is basically always down to do a collab whenever I call her up, and I can't thank her enough for that because she is super talented as well. Also, I want to thank you amazing dreamers who send me emails even now when I'm usually too busy to post because of my work. Follow me on IG and Twitter if you want to piece together the puzzle of what that actually is. But I couldn't do these things without people like Brienne and other amazing people who have these strange experiences, and they share them with me, and then I in turn package them up in my own way and share them with all of you. So pat yourselves on the back. And if you have an experience that you'd like to share with me, send me an email. It's in the description box. And again, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share this video with your friends if you enjoyed it. I hope you guys are doing excellent, doing well, taking care of each other, taking care of yourselves, loving your loved ones, and letting them know how much you love them. Until next time, my friends, I'm Mr. X, and may your nights be full of dreams. Oh, and by the way, all this talk about a coffee stand kind of put me in the mood for a latte. Tonight's code word is latte. Type it into a comment down below so I can see the real dreamers who listen all the way to the end of the videos. Love you guys. Later.
You are my wife.